Hello. So, to continue with this class, first I'm going to tell you about the preferences. So 9 people expressed their preferences of which scripting language to use to continue with this class. 5 people voted for Node.js plus Express, and 4 people voted for PHP. So it's a very, very close race. And as I said, I could teach this class in either one, but because the result of the vote has the Node.js and Express being the majority, that is how we are going to proceed with this class. And yes, what you're hearing in the background is indeed Vivaldi's Autumn. I thought it is it's great for the moment because fall is starting on the 22nd. So, I just thought that would be the right background music. Anyway, I have completed another module. I shouldn't say module, another chapter inside the module of Introduction to Node.js, which is right here. And this one is an actual, introduction. It's a really rather quick introduction into Node.js and how it relates to the other languages, which is JavaScript and ECMAScript. I probably should, yeah. I'm gonna change it so it's not work in progress anymore. So let me do that. Now, because I am taking over this class, kind of not so planned way, so you will probably see me doing this a lot, which is I'm basically creating content for the class as we go, and I'll be staying like 1 to 2 steps ahead of you, hopefully, throughout the rest of this semester. But nonetheless, I'm going to give you instructions. I'll give you activities to do, and and I'll sprinkle the updates like throughout the week. So it's not like we have one day to disclose everything, and then for the rest of the week, you guys just kind of go ahead and do it. So I'll be sprinkling instructions and activities to do, throughout the week, and you just kind of have to, pay attention to the announcements. And generally speaking, I have to get back to work on my syllabus. Generally speaking, you want to, check my messages, for this class at least once a day. Um, so that means I will be counting on all of you to read the messages and start to work on the activities within 24 hours when after they are introduced. Weekends is a little bit special. I understand most people cannot do as much work over the weekend, but nonetheless, this is still a pretty packed class as it is. All right, so let's go ahead and click on this. So for those of you who do not like to read and you just want to, especially people who like audiobooks, this is kind of a rough equivalence to an audiobook because I'm just kind of reading it for you. All right, and I can see someone is already reading the content. That's kind of cool. All right, so the first section basically just talks about what are the relationships between Node.js, JavaScript, and ECMAScript. So just a little bit of background. ECMAScript, this term refers to a standard. In other words, it is not an implementation by itself. It is really just a specification. Node.js and JavaScript are implementations of ECMAScript. JavaScript is implemented for client-side scripting. So all the fancy stuff that you see, inside a browser when you go to a particular web page, most of those are implemented using JavaScript. Even though HTML5, does have a lot of features that do not require the use of JavaScript code anymore. Node.js, on the other hand, is for everything else. So as long as you want to do some automation, some scripting on with outside of the context of a web browser, Node.js can do it. Okay, so it's rather kind of cool because what most people think of Python for, Node.js can do it too. So, from that perspective, learning Node.js, it's kind of killing several birds with one stone, because it's not only for generating web pages, but it is also used for automation in different types of contexts. Oh, the second paragraph talks about how Google Script is also an implementation of ECMAScript. If you have used Google Doc, Google Sheet, Google, I cannot remember the presentation program, but they have a presentation program as well. And also, lots of stuff that doesn't even have a front end app associated with it. So Google Script is an implementation of ECMAScript. So learning Node.js basically enables a person to also be able to program in Google Script. Google Script is really kind of cool because it can be used to access, Google Doc, Google Sheet, and many other things, including Calendar. So basically, the entire Google ecosystem can make use of Google Script, which is basically a form of ECMAScript. And that really opens up a lot of possibilities when it comes to automating business systems and doing all sorts of other stuff. So I just want to throw this out, because some people may not feel comfortable that we are switching from PHP to Node.js, but I just want to point out that it opens up a lot of possibilities, learning Node.js as opposed to PHP. Section 2 talks about a very simple sample program, and here's the sample program. Okay, so you can basically just copy and paste this into a text editor. We'll get to that part. Okay, I'll show you exactly what to do on the Power Server to test run this particular program. And once you type the program in, you want to save it, and what name you want to save it under, it doesn't really matter. Not even the extension, okay, because Linux doesn't really care about extensions. To run the program, the way, at least the way I put in the program, you have to use the command node, and that is the Node.js interpreter, and then you specify test.js as the file that contains the code to run. So that should kind of quickly let you go through the entire thing and experiment with actually writing some code in JavaScript. I mean Node.js. I mean, this is not going to be a very useful program, but nonetheless, it kind of gets you into the steps that you need in order to write some code. Section 3 goes back and take a look at what just happened. Oh, by the way, there are footnotes. Okay, so if you look at there's a little footnote 2 here, a footnote 1 here, and then there are links, with each footnote. Those can be useful for people who are more interested and go, I want to know what that is. So for those of you who are curious, you can certainly encouraged to click on these hyperlinks to learn more about each of those specific topics. So the explanation in section 3 talks about how the command line interface command node test.js invokes the program called node, and that is the interpreter. And there's a little explanation of what is an interpreted language. It doesn't quite say the opposite or the counterpart of an interpreted programming language, which is compiled, but we don't really need to know it, at least not in this class, so I'm going to leave that out. The first line, use strict, okay, which is up here. So use strict is basically a directive that is telling the interpreter to do strict interpretation. And strict means it will try to find problems. Well, they're not necessarily problems, but it will try to find patterns that is indicative of a bug, of a problem. So use strict is really quite useful. Now it is optional for those people who say, I don't want the interpreter to nag me about this and about that. You don't need to use it, okay? Just cross out the first line. However, personally, I have found use strict to be extremely helpful to debug programs. So my suggestion is to keep it there and keep it as the first line of every JavaScript or Node.js program that you write. The second line is the only line that actually does something. It is console.log in parentheses, double quotes, hello world. Okay, so what does that mean? So console is a system object, you can look at it as a variable or something that the system has predefined already. And then the dot is doing the same thing as apostrophe s in English. And then log is what we call a method. Basically, it's a way of doing things. So console.log is basically saying, hey, I want console to do log, which it knows how to do. Okay, and that all that does is to send the output to the console. Okay, which basically translates to the command line interface. What do I want to send to the command line interface? Oh, by the way, it is the following string, which is hello world. Now, this is technically called a string in just about any programming language, but that really is just a fancy name, for text. Okay, so basically it's just text. And you have to enclose your text using double quotes or single quotes in this case, so that the interpreter understands, oh, okay, what is in double quotes is the actual content to be sent to the output. Okay. And in JavaScript, single quotes and double quotes are equivalent. Okay, so they're basically the same. The same cannot be said in C or C++ or Java. So if you want to learn other programming languages, I would suggest you to use double quotes in the context of, oh, by the way, the enclosed is just a string that I want to output, because in other programming languages, single quotes have a different meaning. In JavaScript and in ECMAScript, I should say, it makes no difference. All right, so now that we have said all of this stuff, okay, and you're encouraged to read throughout the entire thing, there's a little suggested lab activity here. So I'm not going to read this out, I'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, so let me go ahead and switch to the terminal, and so I can actually show you the entire process, how to get this done on the Power Server. So this is a terminal that I have. If you're using Linux or Mac OS, you can open up a terminal and then issue the command SSH, and then you want to type in your name, and then your username, which is, in my case, is Anyong T. Remember, it is your full last name plus the first initial at power.arc.los3os.edu. If you're using PuTTY, in the previous video I showed you guys how to use PuTTY already. So it's, instead of typing a command, you just use PuTTY, and you still have to supply the domain name in order to log in. So I press the enter key, and it will ask me about the password on the other side. I'm typing in my password right now, and now I have just signed in to the Power Server. So once we sign into the Power Server, there are a few things that I want to really point out, especially for those of you who want to learn things on your own. Okay, or at least want to be able to learn things on your own. So one of the things about just about any Linux and Unix system is it comes with its own manual system. So if you want to learn about a particular command, you can use man and then followed by the command to learn how to use it. So I'm going to show you, one command here, which is mkdir, which is make directory. So if you just say man, which is the abbreviation of manual, and then mkdir, press the enter key, it will show you the help of how to use the command called make directory, mkdir. And it has the syntax, you can specify a bunch of options. Most of the time you don't really need any options, and then you specify the directory that you want to create. And you can either press the spacebar to continue, or you can use some of the keys, special keys, to scroll up and down. And right here it says press H for help. So if you want to learn about what keys you can use within the man page, you just type H, which is what I'm going to do now, and it shows you all the command stuff that you can do here. Everything that starts with a caret symbol, like this caret E, it means control. So caret E means control E on your keyboard. So all of these are equivalent. Okay, you can type lowercase e, you can type control E, you can type J, you can type control N, and you can also type the carriage return key, which is your actual, on most keyboards it is labeled enter. All it does is to forward one line. It scrolls down one line. and then you can scroll back up using Y, Control K, and also Control P, and so on. Okay, most of the time we want to forward the page. So to go forward by one page, I personally just use space, okay, because it's just easy to access. If you want to go back a page, you can type B or Control B to go back a page, and so on. So this is really helpful. When you're done reading the help of how to use the man page, which is kind of help inside help, you can type Q to get out of this particular screen and get back to the content that is helping you to understand how to use the Mkdir command. And then I just press space here, it scrolls down, and as it turns out, this particular command is really kind of simple. So the man page is pretty short on mkdir or make directory. Alright, so getting back to the command line interface, I just typed Q to get out of the man page. So getting back onto the command line interface or the CLI, this is telling me, this little tilde symbol here is telling me that I'm in the home directory, which is the top level directory that you have access to. And right here, I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to say samples. Okay, this way I can gather all the sample programs into one directory, so I don't kind of mess up the rest of the system, because these programs are not going to be particularly useful other than just testing out a few things. So once I've done this, I'm going to use ls. Okay, and once again, if you want to learn how to use ls, just say man ls, and it shows you that this is list directory content. And this one is a little bit more complex. It has got a lot of switches. For the most part, we don't need to use the switches, in this class, and we don't have the need to do it just yet. So, but once again, the man page is here, and you can use the man page to learn how to use it. And I'm going to quit here, getting back here, and just do ls. So we can see that samples is highlighted in blue, meaning it is a directory, and it is just created. So now I want to change to it, okay? Because what this tilde symbol means is my current working directory is the home directory. So I want to change my home the current working directory to samples. So I use cd, which stands for change directory, and then I just name the folder that I want to change into. So this is equivalent of double-clicking a subfolder in a GUI program. Okay, you're just double-clicking on the folder that is inside the folder already. Press the Enter key, and the command prompt has changed a little bit because it is telling me that my current working directory is the samples subfolder inside my home directory. And this is really important because if you don't specify a path to a file, it will by default assume that it is in the current working directory. So it is important to understand the context of the current working directory as you work with files. So here I am going to type in the program. Now there are several ways to do it. You can, the easiest way is not going to be the easiest to explain. So I'm going to use a less slightly more involved but easier to explain method. Okay, there are a few text editors already installed on the Power Server, Nano being one of them, and then the other ones are VI, VIM, which stands for VI Improved, and NVIM, NVIM, which stands for Neo, which is new, VI Improved. So they all look about the same, but they are difficult to learn. So unless you already have exposure and have some proficiency in VI, I would say this is not a good semester to learn VI because it does have a pretty steep learning curve and we don't have a whole lot of time in this semester. So instead of using the VI, which stands for Visual family of editors, the one that I would suggest most people to start with is Nano. So Nano is an editor. It is a text editor. It's not quite as easy to use as Notepad, but nonetheless, it is fairly easy to use and has syntax highlighted, which is cool. So you just apply the name of the file that you want to create. I'm going to name this as test.js, and then press the Enter key, and now we're in the editor. Once we're in the editor, you can see the bottom part here. Now these are not clickable. Okay, you cannot just click it and find out what and trigger the command. Once again, caret, the little caret symbol, it means control. So if you want to get the help built into Nano, you type Control G, which is what I'm gonna do right now. Control G, and there we go. So and within the help, it also has, it changes the hotkey. So if you want to page down, it is meta Q, and this is meta W. And if I remember correctly, meta translates to Alt. So let me see if that is the case. Alt Q and Alt W. And this is for searching. So once you have identified a pattern that you want to search, this is how you do it. You can also use the function keys. F1 displays the help text, which is standard for most applications. Now, when you do this, you have to be careful because the terminal program that you're using, such as PuTTY, may intercept F1 and say that, oh, you want my help, instead of sending it over to the server. So when you press F1, you may or may not actually get it. But Control G always works. So the M dash something is a meta key, which translates to Alt on your keyboard. So if I want to go to the last line, it's going to be Alt slash. And there we go. We go all the way to the end. If I want to go all the way back to the beginning, it would be Alt backslash. There we go. So M is Alt, caret is Control. So this is how you can navigate the help within Nano in order to find out more about the Nano editor. Now, personally, I don't really use it. So, you just kind of have to go through this help, to figure out how to do certain things that you want to do. I believe it might even have line numbers, which is going to be helpful. So you can search for line numbers. And I think the standard is to use slash to specify what you want to search for. So I just type slash on the keyboard. Now slash is not backslash. Slash is the one under the question mark on the keyboard. Backslash is the one that is under the vertical bar on the keyboard. So make sure that you use the correct slash. So if I want to look for line number, I can just type number here, press the enter key, and it shows the first occurrence. Okay, and that's not what I want to. This is not the help that I want. I want to find out how to display line numbers. So to continue, I'm going to use Alt W right here to click next to find the next occurrence. So this one goes to line and column number. Nope, that's not what I want. Count the number of words. Nope. Line numbering enabling and disable. Blah, 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 blah. Line numbering enable disabled. This is what I want. Okay, so to do that, it is Alt N once I get back into the editor. Okay, so now that I learned how to do this, I'm gonna close the help, which is Control X. So type Control X on the keyboard, and now we're back to the main content. And if I remember correctly, it is Alt N to turn on line numbers. So I'm gonna type Alt N right now, and now we have line numbers. All right, so now I'm gonna type the program, which starts with a double quote, use strict, and double quote, and then a semicolon. And you can see the syntax highlighting is automatic. It would just give you the syntax highlighting right away, which is really kind of cool. And then the next line is console.log. And then in console.log, we want to specify hello world. Hello, comma, world, exclamation point, and double quote, close parentheses, and a semicolon. Now, JavaScript is very flexible when it comes to semicolons. Okay, C, C++, and Java, the compiler is going to nag you and refuse to work unless you put in the correct semicolons. JavaScript, not so much. Okay, in other words, this semicolon here is not really needed. Okay, end of line automatically serve as a terminator for a statement in JavaScript. But if you want to establish a habit where you can translate that habit to other programming languages that are C++ based, including PHP, put in a semicolon here. Okay, it's not going to hurt a JavaScript program or Node.js program, but it will also work in most other languages that are C, C++ based. All right, so now I got the program typed and I want to save the file, right? So to save the file is quote unquote write out. Yeah, I don't really know why they didn't just say save and instead use write out, but that is the same thing as saving. So you type Control O to save the file. It will confirm with you that the file name you want to write to is test.js, and it really is the case, so press the enter key, and then we can now exit the program. To exit the program is Control X. So there we go, Control X. We are now back to the command line interface. And right now I'm going to do another ls to show what is the content in the current working directory. So we just created test.js in the current working directory. So this is also a time when I can say, but what if I want to know what is in the parent folder, what is in the home directory? Okay, well, you can actually do that. All you have to do is to do an ls. Now, there are two ways to do it in this particular case. You can either type your ls and then the tilde symbol, because the tilde symbol by itself is a representation of the home folder, which is the top level of folders that is under your control. So you can do it ls and then tilde, and it will show you, what is in your home directory. But in this specific case, we can also use dot dot, because double dot means the whatever folder that is above the current working directory, and in this specific case, it is your home folder. So it would do exactly the same thing in this specific case. Now, if your working directory is somewhere else and it is not just one folder level under the home directory, then these two commands would basically give you different results. Okay. All right, so getting back to our test program, how are we going to run it? Well, in my explanation, it's already stated you have to type the command node first. So node is a command in the command line interface. It invokes the execution of the NodeJS interpreter. But by itself, if you just type node and then an enter key, it actually does work. But it wants you to enter the program as you go, which is not how we want to do it this time, because we already got the program typed in test.js. So now we have to supply the name test.js, like so, and then press the enter key, and it prints hello world to the CLI. This is what console log does. Okay, console.log, what it does is it generates the output, whatever you specify in the double quotes in this case, is being sent to the CLI, the command line interface. Now, by itself, you would look at that and go like, how is that going to help me generate HTML documents? The answer is it does not. Okay. However, it is one quick way to confirm that yes, we can get a Node.js program to run. Okay, that's good. Two, we get to kind of move around the system a little bit. We understand Mkdir, CD, and so on in order to kind of go from one folder to another folder. Okay, that's good. We learned how to use a text editor, in this case Nano, which is great because now you can do all the editing on server instead of doing it on your PC and then have to transfer things back and forth, which can lead to problems down the line, okay, if you're not careful. So I think that is good. And finally, we get to run the program. Okay. Now, if you have a mistake in your program, the program is not going to run, and it will give you an error message instead. So as a freebie, I'm going to show you what is going to happen when you specify the wrong syntax, when your program is not going to work. So instead of a dot, let's say I mistyped and use a comma instead. So now let me exit the program. Now, if you try to exit the program without saving it first, it's okay. Nano will actually tell you about that. The other thing that will also alert you that you have not saved the program, saved the file before you exit, is there's a little asterisk here right next to the file name. So if you see the asterisk here, that means you have not saved the program. You have done some editing that is not saved. But that's okay, because if I type Control X right now, it tells me that, do I want to save the file. Now, buffer is just a fancy name of the program, of the content of the file that is in memory right now. It is not stored. So I'm going to say yes, and then it will ask me, do I want to write to the file called test.js? And I do, so I just press the enter key. And you might notice that there are a few funny options here. So one option is DOS format and another option is Mac format. This is because the way the end of a line is encoded is different between the different operating systems. Unix uses what we call a line feed character. Mac uses what we call a carriage return character, and then DOS uses a line feed followed by a carriage return. So that's why there is this option here to save a file under different formats. In a Linux environment, just save it without specifying these formats. Okay, just don't specify these formats. Alright, so I'm just going to press the enter key, save the file, get out, and now when I try to run the program again, now if you want to repeat an earlier command, just use the up arrow key on your keyboard. It is a time saver because it just makes it, you don't have to retype the command. So I now try to run the program again and it complains. It basically says, hey, there's a problem, right? Well, let's check out what the problem is. The problem says right here, it tells you what line is the problem, where the problem is, and it also tells you what it is. Log is not defined. Now, obviously, this is not the most helpful error message because if it is possible, the best error message in this case would be, oh, I think your comma should be a period. Unfortunately, the interpreter is not that smart. It cannot infer what you intend to do. It can only tell you that I do not recognize log by itself. Log can be a method of console, but it cannot be something by itself. That is why log is not defined, is the message that is generated. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff, underneath, the actual error message. You can basically ignore those for now. I mean, most of the time they're not really that helpful, so you just need to read the first message, which is, log is not defined in this case. So let's go back in and change the program. Okay, update the program, change the comma back into a dot, and then save the program again and exit. There we go. And this time when I run it, it will be fine again. All right, so what if I want to change to a different directory? What if I want to go back up again and then go to public HTML and so on? Well, use cd. Okay, so you can do it in two separate commands, which is cd dot dot, which is changed to the parent folder. You could also use tilde in this case, and then you can also use a semicolon in this case to separate the two commands. In other words, in this case, I'm executing two commands. Each one is a cd command. The first one is cd dot dot, which means go to the parent folder compared to the current working directory. And then the second one, once we change to the parent folder, go to the subfolder called public HTML in the parent folder. So the semicolon is actually can be used in the command line interface so that you can specify multiple commands on the same line, which sometimes it kind of helps to save typing. Not a whole lot, but sometimes it does help. Now, this is one way to do it. The other way to do it is simply to supply the full path of the folder that you want to change to. So you can basically now specify not only HTML, but I want to go to CISW410. So you can basically now specify a full path to where you want to go, where you want to become the new current working directory. So once I press the enter key, now I have changed the current working directory to the folder that is internet facing and specific to this class. And when I do a ls, I find the sample HTML document, called index.html, in that particular folder. So this is, how you can navigate in the file system inside the command line interface. It may be a little foreign to people who have not used a command line interface, but I can tell you, learning and knowing how to use a command line interface is quite useful. Depending on the publisher, the developer preferences, of different companies. Some companies basically stay away from the CLI, but most companies rely on developers to be able to navigate within the CLI just because there are certain things, you might be able to use VS Code for the most part, okay, so you can avoid the use of using the CLI. But for certain, really tricky stuff, you still have to kind of drop down to the CLI to kind of investigate what is going on. So my recommendation is really just to get familiarized with the CLI as a part of this class. All right, so I think this is long enough as a video because I don't want this to be too long before you guys fall asleep. So I'll be making another one, that basically generates a test HTML document. All right, until next time.